want to start? Do you want me to?
You start.
Welcome to the Tara Palmeri Show in collaboration with The Warning. This is Steve Schmidt. You all recognize him, also played by Woody Harrelson in Game Change. But you all know Steve Schmidt. We do these shows regularly together, and we're just catching up on a Wednesday on all of the news of the week. We'll talk about God, I don't know, Steve, I feel like I'm getting hit by a truck with what's going on in America every single day when I wake up in the morning. But I've also been doing some of my own exclusive reporting on Jeffrey Epstein. We saw Pam Bondi testify for Capitol Hill yesterday. It was something. And then the rest of the country continues to deal with raids. Police on the ground, ICE, and the president's followers say that DC is finally in control. It used to be a crime-ridden city that you could not walk outside of. Obviously, I've lived there for a long time and have some different thoughts. But that's all to say, these are just some of the topics that we're going to cover. And glad to have you here, Steve.
It's good to be with you. It is amazing. The performance by Pam Bondi yesterday.
I know.
The U.S. Senate. I feel disoriented in the way that you described, because I really can't process what it is that I'm seeing, what it is.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is just beyond words awful.
Yeah.
That's the Attorney General of the United States. So I just see this and I have this schizophrenia, I guess. I have, like, on the one hand, a faith that everything will work out and that this will not endure. And on the other hand, just pragmatically, in terms of, I feel like I'm a guy who does well in a city. I know what's around me.
Yeah.
I know what's going on. And I just don't know how you look at all of this and don't come to the conclusion that the American Republic is in a state of collapse.
Yeah.
And I always think about the Titanic, and I've always been fascinated by it since I was a little kid. And the Titanic hits the iceberg at 11:30, and most people on the Titanic barely notice. There is a slight shudder on the ship, and a few minutes later, the ship goes still. It stops in the ocean, and it's the cessation of motion that alerts the passengers that something's wrong. The whole scene of chaos that you remember from the movie plays out in 30 minutes. The Titanic sits there in a state of doom, but until the last half hour, it's not evident to anybody really on the ship that the ship is going down, though the captain, the builder, the officers, they all know it's going down. And yet the lifeboats are set off, the passengers are on the ship, and everyone is oblivious. And I just keep thinking about that as I watch all of this play out.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. It's a great analogy. I don't know. I just feel like you're being gaslit every single day. I have to say, I thought that Pam Bondi's reaction to just, like, very simple questions from members, Democratic senators, was just like, I do not have to answer that. It's like, actually, you do. Did you forget that you work for the American people, that you are a civil servant, that you are being paid by us, and that therefore you, to have that job, have to sit before committees and answer questions under oath and respond to the duties and what you are doing with the power that you are entrusted with, the highest law enforcement person in the country. And so, yes, that means you do have to answer questions. And it was like, how dare you? Like, I am above you. And I just think it's really unsettling. She was very evasive on Jeffrey Epstein. And actually, it was from a member, a Republican, Senator John Kennedy. When he asked her a really simple question, I thought she was really quite revealing, like she wasn't even ready for it. And it was kind of like the Kash Patel grilling, where he wasn't really ready for questions from his own party, right, about Jeffrey Epstein and the cover up. And I'm going to see if I can get the clip from
hypothetically, Senator, maybe they didn't recognize any of the names of the 8 sitting United States senators.
Hypothetically.
That was a joke.
Or maybe they should have gone to Amazon and buy some testicles online. Instead of just saying, sure, I'll just show you the phone records of a sitting United States senator on the basis of an administrative subpoena. Now, do you have copies of the subpoena application?
Sorry. I want the clip where she's talking about, he's asking her about what Howard Lutnick said about Jeffrey Epstein. That is really interesting. If we can't get the clip right now, it was kind of incredible. It was like, well, we're going to get that in a second, but basically she's asked by the same senator, did you talk to your Commerce Secretary when he said in an interview that Jeffrey Epstein was the greatest blackmailer in the world? You said that when she came out in July and said that there were no third parties, he was not blackmailing anyone, there were no Johns. This directly refutes what she said. Have you sat down and talked to him? Are you going to talk to him? And she was like, no, we haven't. Doesn't matter. Whatever, move on. It's like mind blowing to me. And when she was asked questions by Dick Durbin, Democratic senator, it was like, I do not have to answer that. So I think we're going to try to fill that, to find that clip. But if we can't, we'll move on. But I found that to be particularly shocking.
It's shocking again, right? It's just, I just have this chasm, right? On the one hand, right, like this lady's going to be disbarred within 5 years' time, and there'll be accountability for all of this. It's outrageous. And on the other hand, it's clear to me watching it that she lives in a world where she has not given any consideration to the concept that this is a temporary job, that she's not a recipient of a lifetime appointment. And the contempt, the disrespect, and the failure of any senator, right, including on the Republican Party especially, to say you will not come in here and disrespect this institution.
Yeah.
And call her out. And the second thing is, at a political level, these hearings are a disaster.
Yeah.
The Democrats are Charlie Brown trying to kick the football with Lucy pulling it away time after time after time. The Democratic senators aren't capable of running an effective hearing against these people. What happens is every outrageous clip is cut up, chopped up, broken up, repackaged for propaganda purposes, and disseminated across a vast propaganda networks that give the American people a view of this that's not consistent with reality, what happened, but always puts the Democrats into a bad position. The only remedy to it is they need to have an attorney like the January 6th committee did, like Bobby Kennedy did during the racketeering hearings in the 50s, and the lawyer should ask the questions on behalf of the committee. They have to change the tactics. And over again, you have a malicious party that's faced by a feeble party. And neither side seems prepared to change anything about their current course.
Yeah. We have the clip, by the way, of this is a conversation, by the way, this is a question she's getting from a Republican member, John Kennedy, and I thought it was really quite telling. So take a listen here.
Howard Lutnick on October 1 gave an interview to the New York Post about Mr. Epstein. And he described Mr. Epstein as, quote, the greatest blackmailer ever, close quote. Have you reviewed that transcript of that interview?
I have not reviewed the transcript, but I saw the clip of it.
Okay. It appears that Secretary Lutnick was Mr. Epstein's next door neighbor. In fact, their townhomes shared a wall. And the reporter that was talking to Mr. Lutnick, she asked how other prominent men could have been associated with Epstein when Mr. Lutnick could immediately sense that he was a, quote, pervert. And then Secretary Lutnick said, or rather the reporter said, did they see it and ignore it? Do you remember that from the interview?
I do.
And Commerce Secretary Lutnick said, no, they participated. And then Commerce Secretary Lutnick goes on to say, quote, that's what his MO was. You know, get a massage. And what happened in that massage room, I assume, was a video. This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever, blackmailed people. That's how he had money, end quote. Is that true?
Senator, as our July memo said, we did not uncover evidence. This case has gone through 3 administrations, as well as former U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta.
I know that, Pam. But have you interviewed Secretary Lutnick?
No, Senator.
Do you plan to?
If he wants to talk to the FBI or the FBI wants to talk to him, that is more than on.
Don't you think you ought to talk to him after this interview?
Senator, if Howard Lutnick wants to speak to the FBI and if Director Patel wants to speak to Howard Lutnick, absolutely.
Okay. Maybe we ought to get Mr. Lutnick in here too, Mr. Chairman.
Senator.
Yep. There's one more. And this is her response to Dick Durbin, Senator, Democratic Senator, asking
with you is to
very basic
with you.
Just go, Derek.
Quarrel with you is to read somebody that you mentioned I never heard of.
Reid Hoffman.
So who gave the order to flag records related to President Trump?
To flag records for President Trump?
To flag any records which included his name.
I'm not going to discuss anything about that with you, Senator.
Eventually, you're going to have to answer for your conduct in this. You won't do it today, but eventually you will. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Do you think eventually she will have to answer for this, Steve? I wondered about that when he said that.
I believe she will be disbarred for her grotesque misconduct
in Florida.
In Florida, in whatever other state that she holds a law license. Let's imagine she holds a law license in New York, but she will be disbarred, and there will be many disbarments. The arrogance and the it may not seem like it on October the 8th, 2025, but yes, there will be accountability. And at the end of the day, your reporting on the Epstein scandal has been spectacular.
Thank you, Steve.
And singular. And there's a couple of things to talk about regarding it, but all of it centers on a question that you right, have uncovered details of that we would not know about, but for you,
Thank you.
that put in the square question, did the President of the United States rape a 13-year-old child?
Yeah.
And if you watch CNN and you reported on this, and
Mhm.
this was a startling moment because nobody would associate John Berman as a Fox type ideological host.
No, he's a
He's
straight down
a
the middle
he's a
journalist.
straight down the middle, bread and butter journalist.
Mhm.
And he goes on television one sunny autumn day, and he says in an interview with a Democratic congressman and a former prosecutor, there's no reason to suspect that Donald Trump engaged in any wrongdoing. There is a Mount Everest of circumstantial detail and evidence that suggests that he engaged in wrongdoing. So it was a very curious design of how Berman talked about this, explicating Trump when Michael Cohen, who is a resistance folk hero,
Mhm. Yeah.
in an interview with you, discloses under some pretty relentless questioning by you. It's a very compelling interview to watch. It's tense. And he discloses that, hey, no, yeah, I sent a private investigator to go check, find out, track down, in his words, according to Trump, take care of the bullshit.
Yeah.
And the private investigator shows up looking for this young girl, and you're reporting now, talking to the attorney makes clear that there was a lot of there, and Michael Cohen, I mean, I've never done this, right? I've never sent out private investigators to track down a minor child who made an accusation of sexual abuse against a powerful man, against a billionaire, but he did. And he said it on your show,
Yeah.
in words, in English, in sentences, and that alone refutes completely the Berman premise that there's nothing that would suggest that there's any possibility of wrongdoing, which is, of course, ludicrous. At the same time, the most notorious living child sex trafficker in the American penal system, in the federal penitentiary system that I'm aware of, Ghislaine Maxwell, has been moved from under federal sentencing guidelines, the appropriate prison for a child sexual trafficker, to a club-fed prison where there's a puppy breeding program and yoga classes. And according to reports, her pardon by Trump is imminent, which will be one of the great travesties of justice in the entire history of the country by a lawless president. And what you saw yesterday was the Attorney General of the United States with a Republican senator, who, by the way, is a Trump sycophant, but in the entire day, the only person that actually jammed her up with questions and made her look like a corrupt fool was him.
Yep.
It was the Republican senator.
She didn't see it coming.
And she didn't see it coming, but she sure as shit
Yeah.
saw the Democrats coming from a mile away.
Right.
Because these MAGA guys have their number 7 days a week, and all the rest of us, at least from my political perspective, are left defenseless by the incompetence of the Democratic leadership in Washington.
Yeah. I think that it was really telling that she did not care to hear about this blackmail scheme, which is so obviously a part of the Epstein story. Howard Lutnick, having been the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, knowing all of these men like Jess Staley, who was his banker, and others, who had Jess Staley admitted that he had an extramarital affair with a woman associated with Jeffrey Epstein. He would be a prime source for this type of investigation if you cared to investigate. But thank you for mentioning the interview with Michael Cohen. The reason that I started really digging into this is because, I'm just trying to understand, why the president of the United States wants the Epstein story to go away, wants it to die. There's an omerta in the White House not to talk about it, I've been told by my sources. And what is it about this story? And like you said, John Berman said there have been no accusations, no allegations against President Trump. There have been. There was that lawsuit in 2016 that was 3 years before Epstein was arrested, and really 3 years before the world knew about the extent and scope of his sex trafficking operation, thanks to Julie K. Brown. And this woman comes forward, now a woman, but about the story of when she was a young girl, when she was a 13-year-old. And she details being raped in Epstein's apartment by President Trump. And she was going to tell her story a day before the election, just days before the election. But she drops the suit, citing intimidation. And so that's all we know. And I wanted to know more. Why? And who was handling the case at the time? I mean, who was handling Trump's problems at the time? Like Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal, before the election. Michael Cohen, the fixer. And he was going on TV at the time, really defending Trump, being like, if Trump says it's bullshit with like Jeffrey Epstein, it's bullshit. I just know. But no one was asking the follow-ups like, well, how do you know? How did you deal with this suit that came up? What was the context around it? And that's when he told me about the private investigator and speaking to a male lawyer, and the male lawyer saying he never met his client, saying it was bullshit. There were just so many weird details. So I thought, I'm going to call the lawyers and find out what is the story with this Katie Johnson, who has like an almost mythical status. I mean, I hear from my community, the Red Letter community, from them all the time asking about Katie Johnson. Can you find her? Can you talk to her lawyers? And I don't think that I should go out there and knock on the door of a woman who's clearly chosen to not be, chose not to come forward for reasons. If she wants to come forward, she knows where to find me. There are a number of other journalists who tried to speak to her. Some did. But I just wanted to understand more about it and why the media has really just ignored the story altogether. She dropped the suit. She didn't recant what was said. She dropped it saying, that she was intimidated. So who was intimidating her? What happened there? And she said in her sworn declaration that Trump told her that if he told anyone, he would come after her and her family. And, I landed on Lisa Bloom didn't respond, Evan Goldman, Thomas Meagher, but I did land on one attorney, Cheney Mason. And, he had some leadership positions in the bar and he's based in Florida. And I spoke to him and he explained to me in my latest piece in the Red Letter, what he went through, the rigors he went through to confirm her story. He hired private investigators himself to try to verify her story. He spent days with her, flying her from California to meet with his team of investigators to try to decide if she was a credible victim to take on. And he found that she was. He said he believed every word she said. He also said that he doesn't know what happened as to why she never went forward with that press conference, and that he never heard from her again, and he doesn't know whether she's alive. And it just, there were just so many details about this case. And he said he really wished she came forward and did it and went through the lawsuit because it is so similar to the lawsuits that we've seen from other girls, through the number of girls, but now women, but other women who were assaulted by girls. And so, yeah, she is a singular lawsuit force, and she's sort of the missing Jane Doe. We don't know anything about her. We don't know where she is. I get tips and leads and this and that, but I felt like I owed it to the Red Letter community to find out more. and to at least understand the veracity of that lawsuit and the claims that were made. And, Michael Cohen said, I talked to this lawyer who said it was bullshit. He never said, he said he never met his client before. Maybe a lawyer he did talk to had never met her before, but she had a number of lawyers on this case. As you can imagine, she filed it 3 times in multiple states, first in California and twice in New York. And so I felt that after speaking with Cheney, that he had really gone through the rigors of trying to understand his client and whether she had a credible case. I mean, it's a pretty big deal to go after a person running for president, but yeah, she dropped it, and President Trump has denied it. And here we are, years later, and nearly a decade later, he's coming forward and talking about it.
All of it, including the questions that are asked of Bondi about Tom Homan taking $50,000 cash in the bag, all of this, the spectacle of Benny Johnson, right-wing provocateur, propagandist, standing with Kristi Noem on a rooftop, and you're looking at a scene of, I've spent a lot of time in Portland over the years, right? The city's nickname is Portland Weird, right? You got a guy dressed in a frog costume, guy dressed in a chicken costume, you have fries and chickens, and dancing around, and ICE thugs are shooting pepper balls at them off the roof. It's clear. I bet my arms on it, right? There's an email somewhere, right, instructing someone in the hierarchy to just go crazy on whoever is in front of the building, and we're going to find out all the details of that. But when you have a woman who's a convicted child sex trafficker and she's moved to the puppy prison and is likely on a glide path, according to Michael Wolff, right, to be pardoned.
Trump said, he's like, I haven't heard that name in a while. I could pardon her. Sorry to cut you off, Steve, but I have a theory that I want to put out there. I believe that Trump, because he mentioned Diddy, and it's not the first time he mentioned that, I think he'll pardon Ghislaine Maxwell, Diddy, and George Santos in the same day to blur the moral lines and to cause chaos. And so there's no singular story that is focused on. Because
makes total sense. Yeah, 100%, right? And there's a straight line on this, and I talked about it in the moment, going back to 2017 on January 20th, when Sean Spicer walked out and stood behind a White House podium and said crowd size A, which was much smaller than crowd size B, was in fact bigger. And from that moment on, 50,000 lies, 60, whatever number you want to use, and then those are just Trump's lies, right? And then all the lies that swarm around those lies, right? So the accumulation, literally, right, social media, of millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of lies have eradicated the ability of people to see the plain truth right in front of them, whether it's Ghislaine Maxwell and Katie Johnson, whether it's no, there's not a war in Portland. There is a guy in a frog suit and a chicken outfit out there, but it's America, it's Portland, and there's a lot of weird shit going on. And you have National Guard troops arriving from Texas, invading another state, and everything that is happening is at odds completely from the rationale being used to justify every action. And so each day, every day, all day, government officials belligerently get in the face of whoever dares to ask them a question and insist 2 + 2 is 5 and fuck you.
Yeah.
Right? And
Eyes green. Deal with it.
Right? And his political approval numbers are collapsing while his power is increasing. And while he's collapsing, the Democratic Party remains absolutely stuck, frozen in place. Normally in a two-party system, politics works like a teeter-totter, right? One side up, the other down, right? Both can suck, but when one goes up, the other goes down. When one goes down, the other goes up. Trump is going down, but the Democrats are not going up. And what's happening is an evisceration of trust completely with all institutions that benefit, in the end, one institution, and that's the one with the most power, the office of president. So it's a very dangerous set of things that are all coming together in this moment. And I can't think of a deeper type of corruption, right, in a society where your political party, the letter you have next to your name, would allow a person to justify in their mind that, oh, I'm going to abide the rape of 1,000 young girls because, well, I think that could benefit me politically, right? And there's truly nothing sicker. And every founding father of the country talked about you have to have some characteristics in a society for democracy to thrive. And no person could objectively look at this country, our country, and see those characteristics in play. We do not live in a virtuous society.
Yeah. I don't know, Steve. It's hard to follow that, but yeah. It's all I don't know what to say anymore. It's been really, really wild to see it all happen. And it happened so quickly. And because I think there are so many people around President Trump who will not push back, who take the ideas. Like, I remember when I was a White House correspondent for ABC, and I remember hearing from a source, President Trump is musing out loud in the Oval Office about wanting to line up and kill all drug dealers like Duerto does, the Filipino president.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, that is outrageous that he would want to do that, right? And everyone, and this was obviously communicated to me because it was outrageous to this source, you know, that hears this. But now I don't think anybody would stop him. I think they'd be like, okay, how do we do it? How do we do it? I don't think someone would call the press. I don't think they'd do anything. I just think we'd just be like, okay, let's get it together. How do we do it? I mean,
there's a Netflix documentary and there's a book, and it's I think the book is called Ordinary Men, and it's about Special Reserve Police Battalion 60. These were German cops, and they become some of the most notorious war criminals and killers, executioners of the Second World War. And I was just talking about this with my wife this morning, is that my first Nazi, right, when I was like, wow, that's a fucking Nazi bad, was from Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was 11 years old, right? So you had your cartoon Nazis. You knew they were bad, but all of the systems, right, of state in Nazi Germany were, what they were doing was legal. It was a death penalty offense to conceal a Jew. And so at any rate, these guys, this police battalion, these were ordinary people who did not want to join the SS, did not want to join the army, did not want to go fight in Poland or Russia or anywhere else. And they joined up in a militarized society to be cops, right? So they wouldn't have to fight. And the commander of these guys was beloved by his men. And he comes out one morning and he says, I have some terrible news. He was crying. And he says, we have terrible orders. We're going to have to, and it was kill a bunch of Jews and civilians, and it was the first time they were going to do this. And in the reporting of this book, they discovered something about Nazi Germany and the SS that was not known, which was that it had always been believed that the orders had to be followed, lest the person following the orders would be killed, right? Kill the Jew or you get killed. It wasn't true. And so the commander gave a pass to the men. He said, if you can't do this, you're excused. There were 15 to 18 guys who got out of the formation. One of the commanders of those men said something nasty, and he was cut off by the major, the overall commander. He said, no, right? This is a matter of conscience. But everybody who did the killing volunteered to do the killing. And they volunteered to do the killing because it was easier to kill than say no to the order to kill. And that
ambition, I'm sure too, they wanted to move up the ranks.
And that is the central lesson, most important lesson of history. And it all happened within the span of a single living human lifetime. There are still people alive who survived these events. And the terribleness of these events was when peace came and that it was all over, the seminal lesson was never forget, never again. And so you have Stephen Miller on this very strange CNN interview where he stops talking immediately after he says the sentence, the president has plenary authority, which means absolute power. And then Stephen Miller in this interview just stops talking, realizing, I think, that he just said the quiet part out loud. And I could go into some detail about this, but the main point is this. The MAGA regime of Trump and Miller and Noem and Bondi are asserting powers that they do not possess as natural and normal for them to possess on the eve of them being used against the people in a democratic society, corresponding to the moment when you have senior administration officials saying, if you oppose Trump, you're a terrorist.
Yeah.
And that's Nazi language, because a Nazi holds that an opponent is a terrorist because they don't believe in democracy, freedom, dissent, liberty, or the right to disagree. And democracy is what keeps every person safe from the government jackboot. And that's what we're seeing collapse in real time under a blizzard of lies. It's a really terrifying moment. And you have to rationalize the terror while maintaining hope and faith that there have been other dark and terrible times that the country has endured through. And at the end of the day, Abraham Lincoln said, in the United States, with public opinion, anything is possible. Without it, nothing is possible. And so in a few days, we're going to see many scores of millions of people on the streets in these No Kings protests. And as the old song says, battle lines are being drawn. And what's going on is not exactly clear, but it's all coming to a head.
Yeah, it is certainly all happening right now. I wonder if I was at the No Kings protest covering it a few months ago, and the crowds in New York were massive. Certainly it's energized a lot of people. And yeah, we're in some dark times right now, especially when you hear the president saying, I'm doing things for my people. I don't care about those who are not my people. They don't have to get paid during this government shutdown. He doesn't see us as the United States. He sees us as the divided states of America, and depending on political leanings. And that's a scary thought. I think, we as citizens should be treated equally, no matter our political leanings, and to think that some people just won't be getting paid, that he's targeting them because of that they won't be able to feed their families or their livelihoods, or to pay, and he's targeting these cities where there's perceived to be, disrupting the peace and the neighborhoods of people, because they're perceived as not being a part of his party. It's terrifying. And I think I never thought I'd see this happen, even from him, because, we heard about Project 2025 and it was put forward, but like a lot of the ideas that he had during his first term weren't enacted. But the difference this time is that loyalty is above all else. You're not seeing any leaks, which I've written about in a way.
That was a great piece. And really great.
No one's there. Thank you. Yeah, I wrote about the death of the Trump scoop. You can check it out on tarapalmeri.com. But it's about how people would usually tell you about some of his musings, his wildest ideas. They would call reporters. This is their way of keeping democracy in action, keeping the conversation, making sure there is truth to power. But that's just not happening anymore. And the media companies, they don't have the backs. The journalists, they don't have their backs to push back. And I think you're seeing that happen every single day. And I admire a lot of my colleagues that still work in legacy media, but I understand I can almost see the terror on their faces. Everything has weight. I mean, I think about it myself, how we're all being targeted at all times. The New York Times, $15 billion lawsuit. Wall Street Journal, $10 billion. That's chilling, especially for investigative journalists. Yeah. You don't have to go through discovery. You're a journalist.
I want so I'm Barry Weiss and CBS, and does the meeting, and apparently at the end of this meeting, according to media reports, she closes the meeting and she exhorts the newsroom at CBS to let's just do the fucking news. That's what she says. It's pretty cringy. But when I think about journalism, mm-hmm. and the networks in particular in 10 years, you can tell me if you think I'm too much here.
No, yeah, for sure.
I think it's fair to say that there's not been a single deeply philosophical, penetrating question ever put to Donald Trump about what he believes regarding the cornerstones of our society, our civilization. There has never been a single deeply philosophical interview that probes these issues regarding Trump. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I would say so. But I also think, Steve, that even if there was a question that sort of hinted at that, because, a lot of journalists go into these questions, into these interviews. I mean, the good thing about podcasts, it's changed the game. They don't have these editors from above, and they're trying to get viral clips, and they've got to hit all the issues, the shutdown, the this, that, get it all out there. But they're never able to spend the time on those bigger, deeper questions. I don't know that he's really thought about it. He probably doesn't, and he's given away in his winding rallies and his thoughts on power and exerting full control and who he says he respects, Vladimir Putin and others. He's revealed which type of leadership he respects. But I don't think he's given it a lot of thought beyond holding on to power, keeping power, and exerting it to destroy those who try to take it away from him. And the rest, it's just the details. And actually, in a weird way, it sort of ties into what we're going through right now with the Obamacare subsidies being up. It seems to me like President Trump never really read the details of the one big, beautiful bill. And now he's musing aloud that, we should probably get those Obamacare subsidies figured out. Because he's just not a guy that thinks about the details or deeply. He just goes with this guttural, it's animalistic, it's guttural. I know what I want. I want power. I don't care about how the rest of society works. Oh, and I want good approval ratings. So for me to get that, I've got to make sure that people who like me. So I'll make sure that their programs are, covered, or they feel like they're being taken care of. But it's not out of any sort of greater philosophical point of view. That his philosophy is Trump is ruler, and that is his philosophy in life. Everything outside of it, it's hard for him to see. I mean, that's my impression, but I could be, we've never heard him say that. But I think the way that he whines, like what do they call it, the weave, all of those stray comments, that's what that seems to suggest to me.
And then after, like, if that's true, I mean, to me, the biggest story of my life is this story, which is a story of collapse. And when you look at the consolidation of media sources by the son of the second richest guy in the world, who's a massive Trump donor, who's been awarded TikTok, any news division, regardless of whether people care about the issue or now, the foundation of all this, what's going on, is the massive corruption, right? The Tom Homan, for lack of a better word, is a type of pimp. He's in the flesh trade, right?
Yeah.
You go to Tom Homan. I'm gonna give you $50,000 in cash, and you're gonna give me a contract involving the imprisonment of human beings, and on top of that, our government, and we'll talk more about this. This will be plumbed more deeply at a more quiet moment in our future. But
If we ever get that,
the Trump administration sold people to El Salvador to be imprisoned because it's less money to imprison them there for us, but a shit ton of money for El Salvador to house an American prisoner or an exported prisoner. So should a country that holds that all are created equal be engaged in that type of trade? But when you look at the corruption, Tom Homan, the crypto corruption, the Emirati corruption, the Qatari corruption, deals with sensitive chips to the Emiratis. New York Times stories that detail the corruption of this. But at CBS News, because TikTok was assumed by Larry Ellison and through what I allege is a corrupt act, will that be investigated or reported? Does the newsroom have the independence to do that? And I would suggest the newsroom does not have the independence to do it, one. And two, the editor of the news who says, let's just fucking do the news, can't comprehend what the news is, because what she thinks is happening in the society, that's the preeminent issue of our time, is obnoxious, programmed, ideological kids at Ivy League universities who then went on to be mean to her when she worked at the New York Times. And I don't have any doubt that she worked in a vicious cauldron of backbiting, woke insanity that really abused her.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's not what's happening in America. What's happening in America is what Pam Bondi is doing, what Kristi Noem is doing, what Pete Hegseth is doing, what all of Trump's many lieutenants are doing. That's what's happening in America. And so we have a bifurcated system where you have too many people in the country just can't orient around anything that's happening. But we do know that when the Democrats went out and said that it was the greatest economy ever, and the American people concluded that it sucked, that it was the conclusion of the American people that prevailed over the words of the Democratic politicians. And Donald Trump, who claims this is the greatest economy ever, is going to find out that the American people appreciate that he's full of shit. Because outside of the billionaire class, you have 24 states that are now technically in recession. And the economy is seizing. It's zero job growth last month. So you have this kind of weird equation. Chaos is going to bring more demands for more control, more power to deal with the chaos in a permissive environment where a lot of the media will ignore the chaos, will not cover directly or accurately the demand for power. And there's an opposition political party that looks at this moment and thinks that we face a healthcare crisis, not a deeper American crisis.
Yeah. Well, I think that they know that the democracy argument is not working for them. And I do think people are thinking about day-to-day issues right now, especially if the subsidies for Obamacare are going to be up. I mean, and you hear even from Marjorie Taylor Greene speaking out against it. She knows her constituents in Georgia will be impacted. I do think in terms of just like bread and butter issues, especially when you're hearing about job growth, Democrats know this is more salient, as much as I think that the things we were talking about are very important. One thing I wanted to mention, though, Steve, while we're talking, the Harvard Crimson has an article out about Pete Hegseth, one of their former students. And they said when he was at Harvard Kennedy School getting his master's, that he advocated for the creation of a public high school in Minnesota that would emphasize equity and prioritize a diverse student body. It's a 47-page policy brief written by Hegseth. And it was first reported by the Boston Globe, but he wanted a public selective STEM high school in Minnesota with the broader goal of making the United States competitive in the international technology race. And he called for geographic quotas, allocating a certain number of spots to each congressional district to ensure a balance of race, class, gender, and geography. And he said, frame correctly is what he wrote. A STEM school would complement, not compete with existing efforts to promote women and minorities in STEM. The STEM school would increase equal educational access for Minnesotans of all background. And to me, when I read something like that, now people could say, oh, I've changed, right? I hear just craven ambition, just diluting the brain.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Exactly. Now he's the defense secretary. He's a defense secretary who is literally shouting at people, telling them they're too fat and they have to look a certain way. And, you put him through the cycle and he realizes that if he wants to advance in life, if he wants to take the fast track up the greasy pole, then he has to spout an ideology that is contrary to the way he felt at one time in his life. And listen, I had different views when I was in college as well. I've evolved, but I think that it's just really telling, it really is telling that he would be, even if he didn't believe it, the fact that he could put together a public policy proposal like that for his master's program is also a sign of what a chameleon he is and how little he cares about the actual issues and just how desperately he cares about his own personal ambition.
100%. I was on a call yesterday. I was speaking to a California group, and preceding me on the call was a Democratic congresswoman, and she was talking. I got on. I wanted to listen to her about the shutdown, and she started talking about her Republican colleagues, and she said something. This triggers me, right? And I react to this. So, and I laughed out loud on the call when she said this. And probably like 50, 60 people on it, but it was that when I talk to my Republican colleagues, they know, they see, they understand. But as she says to the group, they don't have a choice. They just can't. Bullshit.
They do have a choice.
We all have a choice. And you wrote a piece about Jeff Rowe, one of the Republican Party's consultants.
Yeah.
A lot of people who are performance artists in politics who portray themselves as political strategists, whatever, who have never been involved in a winning campaign, worked on any campaign. I'm not one of those people. I've worked on a lot of political campaigns, and when you comprehend the totality of this moment and what's going on in the country, the constant lying by people to themselves is at the core, because every person in the Republican Party, Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, every person had my position when Donald Trump came down the escalator. There is at most 10 of us who never voted for Trump. He asked me to run his campaign 3 times.
Wow.
I said no. I would not work for Donald Trump for any amount of money, for any reason, for any circumstance, because he's immoral, he's indecent, he's un-American, and I disdain and deplore him. Yet, if you're Marco Rubio, and I wrote this about Marco Rubio a couple years ago, and he went nuts, but it is deeply true. Marco Rubio, if he was in Cuba in 1959, would not have been fleeing to America. He would have been carrying Fidel Castro's briefcase and shooting political prisoners. And most of these people would. At the end of the day, you have a group of people in this country who would kill me for daring to speak out against Trump and call me a terrorist, or people like me, while I would give my life for their right to speak out and to say whatever it is they wish to believe as a matter of their conscience. And those are irreconcilable positions. We talk in this country with a lot of simplicity about like a lot of things, the greatest generation. Well, 2 members of the greatest generation came together one night in Jackson, Mississippi. One was Byron Della Beckwith, the Klansman, and he was holding a rifle, and the other was Medgar Evers. Byron Della Beckwith was a combat Marine and a Purple Heart recipient, and Medgar Evers was a veteran of Normandy. And the one veteran of the greatest generation blew the other one away. One was white, one was black, one was a Klansman, one was a civil rights activist, one was a patriotic American, and one was the type of American that's always been the type that seeks to destroy the country. And that's what the Confederacy was. And there have always been forces that seek to burn down what's been built up. And we're in a burning season where the firemen have become arsonists.
Yeah.
And the arsonists have become firemen.
Mm.
And so as we sit here, in the end, there's 2 elections immediately ahead, and the American people, looking at the security of the country militarily, troops from Texas and Illinois, troops from Mississippi and Pennsylvania, who knows? And we're going to have to decide yes or no. Is this what we want? Is this what greatness looks like? And that question is going to be one of the most important questions ever put to the American people in the history of the country. And the skill that's required to put it to the American people is high. And it's largely missing from most every member of the Democratic Party, with few exceptions. But it's going to be a very exciting 2 years, not just in terms of making an argument against Trump, but as you start to see the outlines of the argument for a renewal of the country, because beating Trump isn't enough.
Yeah.
Renewing the country from the consequences, all of this is going to take a really long time. And that conversation needs to get started. And you would have thought it would have started. It hasn't yet.
Yeah. Well, Steve, I think we've been here for about an hour now, and that was a really strong way to end it, to say the conversation has been started, which means we'll have more to come. And yeah, thanks so much for doing this. And thank you all for joining the live stream. I really appreciate it. I've seen your comments, your questions. Next time we'll get to more of them. And please come back. We'll make this a more regular thing. And I appreciate all of your historical insights, Steve. You are encyclopedic. And I always wished that I had studied history, I will say. I mean, I did in high school, but I wish I had taken it to another level and gotten a degree in it. Maybe one day, we'll see. But thank you so much to all of you. We'll be back again soon. And yeah, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.